Hello, good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what time you're watching this video. It sure has been a while here. I haven't posted a long form video, in ages. I just guess I didn't have too many ideas. I mean, I had some ideas, but maybe not many that I could get fleshed out into a full long form style video. I'm gonna be honest here for a second and say that I don't really tend to have a really tight script on these sort of videos. I have a general outline that exists basically just in my mind, and I sort of that I can be a bit maybe rambly and stuff videos, but I think I know ways to sort of combat that. But anyway, you can think of this video was like a little maybe a little session of rambling, just slightly more edited, because the thing is that it there comes a point in every person's life when they find a movie they're absolutely just insane about. Okay, listen, it happens. Like, if you're a cinephile, you will find a movie one of these days that doesn't leave your mind and just sort of stays there, maybe forever, maybe temporarily, and then like a few years from now you're just like, oh, man. Of course, for anybody who follows me on Letterboxd that somehow got access to this video and knows my deal is on there, that the film from that film for me, Queston, is no Queston. It's the 1969 Best Picture winner, Midnight Cowboy. So obviously I thought it's sort of inevitable that I do a video on that film, right? So the problem is that and probably why it's basically impossible for me to talk about this movie just in video form or in audio form, unless I was like doing some sort of like 2-hour podcast about it. Is that the more I really love a movie, it's the more times I rewatch it, the more disjointed and stuff that my thoughts on it become. Like, I guess the more I have to say about it, because like that can be enough. Then you can just like go into like what it'd be like about like the performances and the writing and the directing and the editing and the cinematography and stuff. And I definitely don't want to ever talk about like, I mean, I would try to, maybe I did it sometimes, but I try to avoid the idea of those long form video essay things that it's just a video essay. Really, it's not really got a clear thesis or anything, it's just talking. But one of those videos that just recap a film with some additional like personal takes on it thrown in. Like, I don't really like, because again, it'd probably be more suited for like a podcast that's format and everything. And then this happened, and I think this is what this scene means, and what is introduced to this scene is that going back to this scene, etc., etc. So I was just thinking that people smarter than me have talked about this movie in smart ways. Just because I've seen it like a billion times doesn't mean that I am good at talking about it. In fact, I'm very bad at talking about movies, even ones I really like. I'll admit that. I'm not like a professional anything. So I decided, like, why not narrow it down to a part of the film, or a part of film in general that I find to be really interesting. Which is surprisingly something I think about a lot of this film, and I think it makes sense, is the costume designs and stuff. And but I think that, yeah, some people think of costume design movies, they probably think about flouncy period style dresses, really elaborate costumes and stuff. So it might be odd that I'm going full costume analysis of a film that doesn't really have that. But I do think that the costume in this film are like integral to within the characters, and because it's a film, I think, about identity in a sense, in a lot of different ways that you could take it, but it's about, I think, about the identities that we want to project out onto society, and the identities that society sort of forces onto us. Like how the costumes can be so stuffed through sometimes about color symbolism. I am a sucker for color symbolism. I will find it at any place, even if it's not intentional. There'll be a lot of talk about color symbolism in this video. How costume shows like the class of the characters and even the changing relationships between characters and stuff through and like symbolic costume choices. I think that like for a film that I would say is probably very popular. I mean, the Academy Award winning film. I feel like a lot of its legacy has just been left up to like having one famous, probably ad-lib line in there, and the fact of the next rated film that won Best Picture. So like that's sort of a trivia quest element to it, and I think that it being a film that I absolutely like feel strongly about. Changed up my outfit a little bit. It's called Scarf on. Kind of funny that I got like a sort of 60s inspired like going on talking about one of my favorite movies from the 60s. But that happens. So I feel like going through the costume design is probably just like, first, a majority of the video will touch upon the costumes that the main characters Joe, Buck, and Rico Rizzo wear throughout the film, because there's Joe's character, like there's like a lot of symbolism significant to the clothing and the sort of evolution that the character's clothing goes through in a sense, and how it plays into the ultimate conclusion of the film and stuff. Also, by the way, I would be like literally I'll be giving away the entire plot of this movie properly, so yeah, spoilers for like a nearly 50-year-old movie. But yeah, seriously, go watch Midnight Cowboy. I don't know if it's still on Tubi. Probably a Canopy still, I don't know. Also, something I want to keep in mind, and something that I thought about a lot in depth is this weird color symbolism. I noticed that probably wasn't at all intentional. But the color symbolism of like, I sort of noticed the pattern that, to me, that in scenes where characters are wearing white, it feels like it represents scenes in which there's sort of the idea of a hope of a better future or something. Usually, like last scene in the film, preceding a devastating blow to the characters' like dreams, delusions, fantasies. And when characters are seen wearing black, it represents like the sort of grittier, more realistic side of things, like the sort of crushing or cracking of that dream. So as I go through the film, and with like one of these sort of side characters, I'll be bringing up that sort of theory a lot. But yeah. And also, Charlie shout out, of course, the costume designer for this film was Anne Roth, who is a very well-known costume designer. She's done designs for films like The Birdcage, Clue, To the Talented Mr. Ripley, among many others. The Village, that M. Night Shyamalan film. So she's done a lot. I think like her Luxembourg, and I think I read this article once about the clothing in this film and stuff. So I'll probably be citing information like when I remember from that article, so I'll try to find the link to it. I think it was like a GQ, it was like part of like some sort of magazine. I think it was written maybe in part when that one book about the making of Midnight Cowboy was coming out, which I haven't read yet, but I should really read that making of book. But yeah, I feel like, again, costumes play any type of role in this film because this film focuses on a man who is simply putting on a performance for the majority of the film. This like sort of cowboy stud hustler persona. And the interesting thing is like that he knows that it's not real. He says so himself. Like he ain't a real cowboy, but he has one hell of a stud. And like I think that's like the whole persona thing, in my opinion. I mean, this is I think how I do it because like sort of his way of coping with the trauma that he's been dealt with, his way of regaining his sort of like lost control and his masculinity after the tragic events that occurred in his youth. And a lot of the film has to do with him grappling with that trauma, but also like with the sort of changing of that whole cowboy symbol and what it means now, or at least in now, but now I mean like the time the film takes place in was different than what it meant back then. That whole like death of the American dream thing, death of like the old Hollywood and the Western in general, and it's also I think a lot to do with maybe like sort of the commodification of, or like the capitalization on like certain sort of things, and like how some characters see him as a commodity or something to sort of gawk at because of this, the whole style and stuff. I think it's interesting that we are introduced to Joe in the I mean, we're first introduced him through just hearing his voice alone, so it's like this is a character direction like we don't even like have like a face or a body to assign, but it's like I feel like the nude form is like sort of like a blank canvas in a sense. It's also like used to like symbolize vulnerability in a lot of films and stuff sometimes. But yeah, I think that's more relevant in a sort of later scene. But yeah, the opening few minutes of this film where it was him getting dressed in the cowboy outfit, it's like very sort of like deliberate focused thoughts on his body and stuff, like of him like putting the boots, but putting on like the pants and the shirt and stuff. Whereas a lot of these like really like fancy decorated jewel toned shirts. So the first one that he wears is a green button up, so we all like these like embellishments, embroidered designs on them. So, like very much a lot like on there, and I feel like the hat and the boots definitely make the actors seem like stand out more because they tend to cast like I feel like extras or even like Dustin Hoffman being sort of he is characters that you see Joe sometimes around are like considerably shorter than him, but I feel like these sort of hat, boots, that sort of stuff like sort of adds to like a sense, or sort of like seems like it's like sort of maybe like projecting a sort of more intimidating sort of look. Again, a lot has to do with like this film has to do a lot with like masculinity and maybe like bringing like sort of like films about toxic masculinity and stuff. I don't know. Again, I have zero idea what I'm talking about. And then I actually do start talking. I was trying to think, like, or contemplating thinking about, like, you know, I mentioned that I'm a sucker for color symbolisms, and I was like thinking maybe the colors of, because all of his motifs throughout the film are like some sort of colorful garment. And I was like, colors tend to symbolize things. I couldn't read too much into this, and it didn't make sense forever. Couldn't get too far in it, but I thought that this first one being green makes sense because I feel like green, first of all, it represents money in a lot of connotations. And like that's what one of the things he's trying to pursue is being a prostitute so he can get rich or like get money off of rich old ladies and stuff. So it's a driving force. Also read that green represents renewal and good luck, and this entire film where he's literally going to New York for hopes of a sort of better life. So that's like sort of like a renewal of sorts. I feel like any sort of film focused on moving places has to do with renewal in a sense, and maybe that's a little bit connecting back to nature because this is somebody moving from like a more rural area to the metropolis and like sort of be like going into like sort of that thing. I think the interesting thing about like is how sort of immediately like the film just like sort of tells you that nobody really is buying this whole cowboy life because this whole like rehearsed fates about how he's going to quit his job and like super cool and stuff. Then he's really like he's clearly very proud of himself, but like one of the first things that happened when he went to the diner is that his manager, I think, or somebody comments on his get up and is like, what the hell is that? It's not the first time a character will comment on his get up, but it's like clearly like got me like so like a lot of the characters in this film like think the whole cowboy thing is odd and out of fashion. Even the one woman near the end who Joe manages to give his services to asks at the party when referring to him as like why a cowboy. Like everyone like finds it to be like really sort of strange and stuff, and you get like that part where we're going to the bus and he sees the ladies giggling, obviously like because they think he looks stupid, but the poor bloke just thinks that like they're into it or something, you know, tries to be like chivalrous and stuff. I mean, like, yeah, the poor guy. Yeah, I think that a lot of it seems to me that this whole, like, I haven't read the novel this film based off of yet, but from what I've garnered from, like, just repeated rewatches and some Wikipedia pages reading about the book and just what I garnered from, like, the flashback scenes of the film, it was, like, the persona of the cowboy today comes from, the one, like, older man we see throughout a lot of flashbacks that was, dressed up as a cowboy, so, like, there was clearly, I think, like, some sort of influential male figure in that guy's life that he looked up to enough to or was like, okay, this is, like, what the masculinity looks like, essentially. And then also, like, a mix of it is also, because this is a character who's, like, really clearly influenced by media. Because you see it a lot throughout the film, is, like, the idea of, like, media influencing both Joe and Rico as characters. They're sort of influenced by what they've seen and heard about certain things. like for Joe, it's like he grew up just like watch TV a lot that has that sort of radio and stuff, but it's like that sort of stuff like I guess put like the idea of like the Western idealized like American hero or whatever in his mind and stuff. So he's like yeah, this combination of things. Also, being part of it has to do with again the trauma from the assault and this like sort of weird like almost Oedipal like fixation he has towards older women stemming from the basically abused or grooming or whatever I feel like that his grandmother put him through, and how she would always like tell him like that you're the best looking comic because like he's seen wearing like the sort of hat even in like flashbacks where he's like very young or something. So it's like I feel like it's like sort of like a persona that's been built up for a long time. But ultimately I feel like the important thing is it's a coping mechanism. It's not a very healthy one, but it is still fun regardless. It is like I guess like a sort of shield and stuff. But yeah, be continuing on with the I'll be continuing on with the film by like going through different characters in chronological order. I know I said that I didn't want to do one of those. I'm gonna recap the movie and add my comments in this. Technically I'm not doing that. Technically I'm just saying, oh, at this point of the film we see a character wearing this and stuff. I might not even go in order. I mean, I mentioned this scene from the like third act of the film. It's like a couple minutes ago. But when he gets to New York on the day where he has his whole fling with Cass and meets Rico and gets scammed by both of them essentially, he changes into this blue shirt that has sort of parts and birds on it. Again, I feel like the birds can like connect back to nature. It's a pattern that's like more, it's like a sort of free, flowy looking pattern. And it's also, oh, I just noticed or just thought about how in the scene where Joe and Rico are at the bar, the song that's playing, the lyrics talk about like freedom and flying away and escaping somewhere, so I guess that's kind of a jingle connect to make when talking about like the whole like bird search thing. And also like yeah, again with the color symbolism thing, I couldn't think of too much for this because like I think usually like blue is with like a first thing is like gonna be calmness or something. It's a calm color, really fit. I think the closest association I can get is like the whole like feeling blue, melancholic sort of connotations blue has. Like blue is also a very like sad color usually, and this is sort of when the two events that occur when he's doing this, the two major ones where it's him failing so miserably at getting Cass to pay him that he pays her, and then thinking that he's struck finding a new man sort of having that promise to him, and then realizing that he's been scammed out of like basically himself money. It's sort of that the start of that sort of downward spiral for him. So I guess that could connect back because it's when the film starts going into like real bummer territory. So yeah, maybe that's sort of there in a sense. But yeah, so you know how I said that I had this theory that about what the color white, black and white represent in this movie. Well, I guess first off, you could say that maybe Jones' cowhide suitcase, aside from the surface level, like it's obviously because he's the whole cowboy thing. represents how he's like a black and white sort of naive view on the world. But Brown's sort of like theory is through the interaction he has with Cass and her two outfits, because he's in like only 5 minutes in the movie, so he doesn't really wear a whole lot. First thing we see her wearing is a little like simple white mini dress, and at this point in the film when he meets Cass on the street and stuff and they have the little chat, it's sort of feels like, okay, maybe things are going to like didn't work out with the first film when he tried to argue, but this seems more promising because he's inviting him in and stuff. It seems to be going pretty well. Like, that's where I think it's like why representing the idea of better life or the hope of like things working out and stuff. And they do seem like that for a while, but then you get to the scene where Joe and Cass are making small talk after they have sex, and you have Cass in this sort of a sequined black mini dress, and like black is usually the seen as the opposite of the color of white symbolically, and I think in that case black could represent like the harsher reality of things that are like things not working the way you want them to. And this is the scene where it's revealed that like Cass is able to play one over and so one gets money from him, and essentially like he fails at his goal of getting paid, so there's that. And then shortly after that we were introduced to Rico Rizzo, who we also see wearing white. This is the most like, aside from a fantasy sequence put together, we see the character. So I think in a sense it's interesting we're both introduced to the main characters putting on a false persona when we see their first outfit, because we're introduced to Joe really getting dressed, coming into character and stuff, and introduced to Rizzo in a more like slightly more business-like outfit. Like, it's clearly sort of thrown together with like pieces that look like they match but not really, because you can see like the sleeve, the red sleeves of the shirt taking the jacket makes it look like the jacket isn't like a bit ill-fitting and stuff. So like, there's sort of hints that like I feel like this character isn't like the suave business guy that Joe was looking for and stuff. But we also get again that character wearing white because he got like a white blazer, white pants on, and he is promising Joe management. Joe was being given like the hope of, okay, this is gonna work out. And it's interesting that he has Rico has this red shirt on underneath, because I feel like red typically is associated with like dangers or warning signs. It's a violent, harsh color, and like when you see a stop sign, they're pretty much like all the time like red and stuff. So it's like a warning sign, but it sort of to me feels like it could be read like this is clearly somebody that he's to not trust, but this person is putting on like the illusion, the facade of helpfulness and reliability and honesty, because also white is like a very pure and honest color. It says it was like, purity and sometimes divinity and stuff. So I feel like it is. I know that the costume designer said that Anne Roth, they said that she based this character's styling choices off of like how somebody would like try to emulate the style of like characters from Fellini films, like a Little Spita. Again, something I took from, I believe, the GQ article I read. And also, I think there's also something interesting, little sort of already in the word when they're first getting together, that sort of contrast, that sort of like hints like that opposites attract dynamic and stuff. You got a character like wearing blue and a character wearing red, and I feel like there's a lot of like the whole trope like the blue and red duo, and how characters that wear blue are often contrast against characters that wear red, as like they're like that are associated with those colors tend to be narrative foils or something like that in a sense. But even like the patterns on their shirts and stuff, because like Joe's is like it's more natural, sort of free flowing with like the birds, and Marisa's is more like more angular, more linear, like these sort of straight lines going across the shirt pattern and stuff. So there's also like that sort of sense of like opposites there, and like it's like here's this country person and here's this city person. So the next shirt we see Joe wears and when he wears the majority of the second act and the third act is a red shirt. And I think again I mentioned how I feel like red can be associated with like danger and stuff. Like so like first off, I think like red is also a very passionate color, associated with like a romance and stuff. So it could go like he's still trying to kind of like that sort of stud persona. He's got a manager at this point and stuff, but he's throughout this whole entire act going further into the darker, depraved sides of New York and stuff, the shadier parts. So there's that sense of danger there, that sense of danger and violence as he has to like resort to more criminal behaviors to survive and stuff. Also, I feel like it takes him back to how he's, when he meets Rizzo's wearing a red shirt and then now Joe's wearing a red shirt. Also, speaking of, I feel like it's interesting how again I mentioned the color black as being representative of like the harsh, darker sides of New York and the gritty reality of things, and how Rico's the character who's wearing the majority of the film like that black worn down coat. It's clearly wears most of the film aside from like a very dark purple. But it's often in contrast against other characters or even his own character like wearing white, like in the dream sequence and stuff. But I sort of feel like it sort of is the pinnacle of what I think black symbolizes in that movie, because it's like the costume, that black outfit makes it look a lot like this is somebody's like been sort of swallowed up by the darkness of the city that's been rendered invisible by the harshness of that type of a world. Probably one of the most like significant examples of, again, I mentioned just a few seconds ago, the color white being someone is in the Florida dream sequence where everything is like very pastel, very bright. Lots of characters in like red, white, or like brightly colored clothes, particularly Rico, who's wearing an all white outfit. And again, I feel like this is essentially the pinnacle. I think white represents in the film is like this hope or like delusion of this idealized future and stuff. Because this is like the escapist dream fantasy and stuff. So it's like all white and stuff. It's everything's perfect and pure and great. And like you just like get these contrasts in that sequence between like cutting back to like the dream and then the reality in these like opposing sort of costumes and stuff, because it's the most, it's like a very well put together costume. It's like a fancy suit, got like a monogram or whatever you call it, like initials in gold on it, or not to feel like it's sort of been maybe a little bit of a foreshadowing, because I feel like something, there's also this association I feel like with like white and like divinity, angels, the afterlife, and like a heavenly sort of sense, and how this character just ends up dying by the end of the film. And spoilers for a 50-year-old movie. But yeah, as we reach the end of the film, we are going to introduce another example of how Joe's cowboy outfit has been commodified. And now that reminds me that I did forget to mention the scene where Joe and Rico are verbally insulting each other, and Rico just like mentions like how like his whole cowboy steak isn't popular anymore, and the only people that it appeals to are gay men. And Joe's hurt by this because like it's like he's based his whole self-worth on this persona, and it's sort of been twisted to him into something that he just doesn't want. It goes against what his ideal of a man is, so he's like very defensive about it. I think one thing that to me is the whole line where he says, well, like, the only thing I'm ever good for is, well, it's not just like the cowboy persona, but the persona of this like stud guy that he's putting on to feel self-worth. He's been thought that his only value exists in like his sexual prowess and stuff. So anyways, back where I was before, when Joe is approached by the twins Hansel and Gretel, the two Andy Warhol like factory people that host the party near the end, they're singling him out, I think, for his outfit. They see it again as like a commodity and something they see like, oh, it's like this like weird, quirky sort of thing. And he ultimately ends up like, you know, in the party accepting that sort of attention put towards him, because this thing in Albertus and Rico, who aggressively rejects any attention put towards him at the party that isn't from Joe, or isn't from Joe, even then is having a very bad time there. Then again, it's like they find it as like a sort of like odd sort of thing that's like, oh, we can like put this guy in our weird artsy party, in our weird artsy film. Make it into a character that, again, back to the color right, the character that has one of the most significant costumes to me in the film, certainly played by the gorgeous Brenda Vaccaro, who was introduced wearing a white sort of knit mini dress that looks like that, like flared out sleeves and stuff. See, to me, watching this film, I feel like sees costume in a way that makes her sort of stand out against the other extras in the background. Like, it feels like the camera is filming it in a way that's actually meant to like draw attention to this woman because she's going to be important later or something like that. But also, I think it's sort of like her in a way it's like she's a kid who feeling out might be their ticket to getting things back on track. She's like this beacon of hope for them in the narrative at this point. She's just like wearing all the white amongst these characters that are dressed in maybe in like more darker sort of clothes and stuff. And quickly find out, of course, that she's into Joe enough to want to take him home with her, and they're gonna get it on and stuff. Probably the most I think, iconic thing this character wears is the fur coat that she wears during the scene where they're exiting the party and during the majority of their little scripted foreplay. Kind of a fun fact, the cover was intended to be nude in the skin originally, but did not want to appear nude on camera, so she asked Dan Roth for help, and Roth found the fur coat in the back of somebody's truck, I think it was, and brought it onto set, and the director liked it enough to have her wear that during the sex scene. This is a story that I've heard a lot of times, mainly in like interviews with the cover herself. So it's helped, I think, if you look deep into like the behind this film, probably a common story, I guess. But it's a cool thing, because I feel like, to me, it felt like a unintentional choice from the get-go, because it makes sense, because the fur coat, I think, usually symbolizes like wealth and status, the very fancy item and stuff. So it's already like showing the sort of dispariting class between Joe, who was in like poverty, and Shirley, who was very rich and well off, and like that sort of like disparity between them. But also in their scene, the scripted scene, Joe is completely in the nude. He's completely vulnerable, as Shirley is simply taunting him, threatening his masculinity, emasculating him a lot, questioning his intelligence and his sexuality and stuff. He's not protected, and Shirley has the coat on her. She is protected both in like trying to think that she is in control of the situation with her dialogue and stuff, but also like she is protected because she isn't in the same like sort of danger that Joe and Rico are in because of their social status and stuff. And the fur coat, like, also I think harkens maybe to the line Joe says later when he's talking to Rico about how aggressive Shirley is during the sex, how she was like a damn alley cat, and sort of like that sort of also I think fits with the animalistic nature of when they make love, how like aggressive it is with her clawing into him and stuff. But yeah, it's like interesting, like a little sort of choice there. And harkening back on what I mentioned about how they were in a set when Cass is seen with Joe, she starts off wearing white, and then she ends up wearing black when the whole plan falls through. Well, Shirley ends up wearing a white dress in both of the scenes where we see wearing clothes, the white dress at the Warhol party and the white sort of suit dress thing she wears when she's on the phone with her friend after it's recommending Joe's towards to that friend. So it's like, I think in this case, make an opposite of Cat's Threesome where it's like this character is wearing white and it's representing that things actually did go right this time. Now, yeah, it is rendered mood pretty much immediately after Joe gets back and finds out that Rico's dying. But at the time of the narrative, like, we might still think, and especially Joe thinks, that things have actually worked out this time. This is the scenario that he sort of was hoping to get with Cass, that he's getting again, and then he's getting it, and that he's getting it this time. In fact, it's sort of even like better than it was maybe mentally thought, because not only is he getting the money from Shirley, he's gotten the recommendation, so he's like sort of back on track. I guess concluding this also since this concludes the majority of the part I had about the colors black and white, I'll go with some like more minor examples that I think that I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into, that I just think are being interesting. one of them is, I feel like it could maybe connect some of the dresses that Joe's girlfriend from Texas, Annie, wears in the flashbacks. Is like, in the first flashback, she's uh, wearing a white dress, and it seems to be showing this sort of romantic moment between her running into Joe's arms or running across the field to to his house and stuff. And this is when he's going to New York, so there's lessons like this idealizing big promise fantasy sort of thing. Uh, Later on, when during the infamous movie theater scene where Joe ends up getting having to resort to prostituting with a man in the movie theater on 42nd Street, he dissociates and fantasizes about Annie. But in this scene, Annie's wearing a like black dress, I think with like florals on it. It's like with how this connects to like this scene, this flashback it's taking place in. It sort of maybe could work with the whole the thing about Black representing the darker side of the city, or the gritty violent things. This is when he's essentially going against what he initially hoped to do in New York. It's a very low blow for the character and stuff. But there's like other characters I think that wear black, because obviously like it's not really a fully formed theory that makes sense, because there's either the characters that we see in like the darker sides of like New York that wear all sorts of colors, all sorts of different clothes, but like take the lady with the rubber bands credited as the freaked out lady, who Joe sees I think twice during the film. Once rubbing the toy rattle over her face with the kid, and then later in the montage of when he's walking around the streets and seeing like all the sort of people that have been like left behind by side, like the darker sides of the city. He sees the woman again running across, seemingly paranoid about something, darting back and forth, looking for an unseen pursuer. And in both scenes, this woman is wearing all black, and especially in the second scene where it's very dark out, it sort of again makes like these people have been like rendered invisible by the city's dismissal and cruelty. And then like how Hansel and Gretel are wearing these black ensembles both when getting the party invitations to Joe and Rico, and when they're at the party, when they are greeting the guests, they're wearing these all black outfits. And even though these are characters that are relatively more well-off than some of the characters that we meet through the film, they're still sort of connected with that sort of strange, darker side of the city and stuff. Ultimately, I feel like one of the strongest parts of this film's craft design comes from the very end of the film. And how, in the final act, as Joe and Rico's goals of getting to Florida like become like it's like one goal that they both share, their wardrobes start to match more by the third act of the final like 10 minutes or so of the film. Because after getting the money from Sterling, Joe changes into a purple shirt, which matches the purple suit that Rico wears throughout some of the film. Especially during the final sequence on the bus, they're both wearing purple, so their wardrobes are starting to connect in terms of style and stuff. And then like the most significant change in the costumes film comes when Joe discards his cowboy outfit, because it's like, again, it's, I think to me, symbolizes him sort of being able to move past that toxicness and get like sort of work on maturing and stuff, and realizing that that was all like unhealthy, and how like he can't go on like that. It's part of like why I find the ending to like have the slightest sort of sense of hope in it, is like the significance of that little moment. And there also, I think one of the significant moments near the end is his whole conversation with the diner waitress, where he's able to have like this pleasant conversation, specifically another moment, without feeling like either that she wants to remember that he needs to get something to her. It's just this little small talk, nice moment between two people. I think even the waitress's costume reflects that. She's wearing a very inviting sort of pastel pink uniform, and the way she's styled, she doesn't have like any makeup on or anything, no makeup on. Her hair doesn't seem to be excessively styled or anything. It's just very simple and honest. So it's like the idea of like, maybe he's moving on to a more simple, more honest, and ultimately more beneficial way of seeing things. And the removal of the whole like hat and the removal of the boots sort of seems like to take away from what, like, again, it's in the end earlier, that intimidation, that stature, so he feels more like vulnerable. I think really hammers into what makes the performances at the end, like it's like the final scene so effective, is like how vulnerable he looks. I think that probably plays into it a bit to me. And the third is this yellow, which I think connects like the sun sign, hope. It's a positive color, but also it's more subdued than the more jewel, brighter tones of his other clothes. It's, again, like more simple, more understated. Also, like, interesting contrast to how like the shirts Jordan Mako wearing in the first scene they meet, and in the final scene they're together. Like, first scene, Joe's wearing a nature-based pattern shirt, and then Rico has like more the lines, and then in the final scene, Joe has like more line-based pattern with like the sort of grid pattern on his shirt, and then Rico has the palm trees, which are more like a nature-based pattern. So like could also, I think, represent like how their dynamic sort of has like shifted throughout the film. They're both wearing the color bit. They're both wearing very similar styled shirts and similar colors. They're both wearing yellow button-ups. It's the most similar their wardrobe looks throughout the entire film. It's like that gradual like increase, like their wardrobe increasingly becoming like matching as the film ends. Maybe significance in the fact that like Rico's shirt is like much more like brighter yellow and stuff. But maybe it could connect the fact that he essentially dies with his sort of whole like dream version of Florida's stolen act, because he never got a chance to see it, and how like he essentially like has that sort of fantastical view of it until the very end, as opposed to Joe, who is able to like sort of grow past his own, like, fantasies and stuff. But yeah, I guess this is sort of where that whole analysis concludes. I can't say that I'll post another video like this long anytime soon. I just wanted to get out of the way, and I figured that why not? If anybody wants to hear more of my, like, in-depth thoughts on this film and stuff, look at my letterboxd review for this film. I've covered a lot of bases with, like, analyzing all the rest of this movie, because after happened to me watch movie like almost 20 times on letterboxd, I mean, jeez. Anyways, I'll be off now. Bye bye.